There is a specific kind of story that late-night television was built for. Not the slow-moving policy story that requires 3 explainers and a chart. Not the diplomatic crisis that demands careful sourcing and measured language. The kind of story late night was built for is the one where a senior government official, appointed to lead the most powerful domestic law enforcement agency in the world, is alleged to have been so consistently and thoroughly intoxicated on the job that members of his own security detail had difficulty physically waking him. That story, the Kash Patel story, and Jimmy Kimmel, returning from a week off to find this waiting for him in the stack, approached it with the energy of a man who has been handed exactly what he needed at exactly the right moment. Let's establish what we are actually dealing with here. Kash Patel is the 9th director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. He was appointed, confirmed, and placed in charge of an agency with approximately 35,000 employees, jurisdiction over federal crimes across the country, and a 7th-floor office in the J. Edgar Hoover Building in Washington, where the director is generally expected to spend a meaningful portion of his working hours. The Atlantic published a report. The report, produced by journalist Sarah Fitzpatrick, was sourced to more than 24 individuals, including both current and former FBI officials. The central claim in that report was that Patel had become known inside the organization for what the story described as bouts of excessive drinking and unexplained absences. The most vivid specific detail was the one that refused to leave the news cycle once it arrived. On multiple occasions over the preceding year, members of his personal security detail had difficulty waking him because he appeared to be intoxicated. They had reportedly requested to perform a breach, the specific protocol used when a protected individual is unresponsive and cannot be reached by standard means. Kimmel summarized the situation with the precision of someone who has spent 2 decades making complicated things land quickly in front of a live audience. "We are living in a golden age of wild animals being exposed to illicit substances," he said, framing the entire segment before he even mentioned Patel by name. Then he delivered the line that became the one people were repeating the next morning. Her version of the story makes it sound like Patel was blacked out more than the president's name in the Trump-Epstein files. The audience reacted immediately. The line did 3 things at once. It summarized the drinking allegation, referenced the Epstein file suppression controversy that Patel had been grilled about separately, and landed a joke that functioned as a news update inside a punchline. That is efficient. That is very specifically what late night is for. Patel's response to the reporting was to file a defamation lawsuit against The Atlantic for $250 million. Not a statement of denial, not a press availability with supporting documentation. A lawsuit for $250 million filed within days of the story's publication. The Atlantic responded with a statement saying it stood by its reporting and would vigorously defend the outlet and its journalists against what it described as a meritless lawsuit. Kimmel noted the specific energy of attaching a number that large to a denial, observing that $250 million is not a subtle way of saying something is untrue. It is the kind of number that turns a news story into a spectacle, and spectacles tend to produce more coverage of the original claim rather than less. The legal action designed to shut down the narrative became the mechanism that extended it. This was also not the first time Patel had taken legal action over reporting on his public behavior. A federal judge had recently dismissed a defamation lawsuit Patel had filed against a former FBI official who had described him as being, in that official's specific language, visible at nightclubs far more than he had been on the 7th floor of the Hoover Building. The judge dismissed it. The claim that he spent more time in nightclubs than in the building where his job was located had survived legal challenge intact. Kimmel connected that earlier case to the current one without having to explain why the connection mattered. The audience did that work themselves. Then came the Senate hearing, and the Senate hearing was its own separate category of event. Patel was called before the Senate Judiciary Committee, primarily to answer questions about the Epstein files, which the administration had repeatedly promised to release, which had repeatedly not been released, and which remained the subject of a specific legal framework explicitly stating that records cannot be withheld, delayed, or redacted on the basis of concerns about embarrassment, reputational harm, or political sensitivity. The law says those things directly. Embarrassment is not a valid basis for withholding. Reputational harm is not a valid basis for withholding. Political sensitivity is not a valid basis for withholding. The files are required to be released in searchable and downloadable form. This is the law. The files had not been released. Patel was asked to explain why. He did not explain why. He was, in Kimmel's specific assessment, dodgy, sketchy, sniffy, combative, and just generally unpleasant. Senator John Kennedy, a Republican, asked him a direct question. Who, if anyone, did Epstein traffic these young women to, besides himself? Patel's answer was that there was no credible information. None. If there were, he said, he would bring the case yesterday. Senator Kennedy, who had just been told by the FBI director that there was no credible information connecting Epstein to anyone besides himself, responded with 4 words. Forget yesterday. How about tomorrow? Kimmel let that exchange play without additional commentary. The exchange did not need any. Senator Cory Booker did not take the same measured approach. He had been watching the hearing, and he had reached a conclusion that he shared directly with Patel on the record in a Senate chamber with cameras rolling. "I think you're not going to be around long," Booker said. "I think this might be your last oversight hearing." This is a sitting senator telling the sitting FBI director to his face in public that his tenure is effectively over. Patel was asked to follow up on the Epstein file situation and on the separate matter of Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's primary accomplice, who had recently been transferred to what reporting described as a significantly more comfortable federal facility after a meeting between her legal representatives and Trump's personal attorney. Patel did not have an explanation for the Maxwell transfer. He did not have an explanation for the file suppression. He had the general posture of someone trying to leave a room that has no available exits. Then came the locked-out incident, which occupied its own special place in the territory of stories that sound like they were written for television. According to The Atlantic's reporting, Patel had experienced difficulty logging into his computer approximately 2 weeks before the story published. The technical issue, which was resolved as a standard IT problem, triggered what the reporting described as a significant panic. Believing he had been locked out of his systems because he had been fired, Patel reportedly called at least 9 separate people to inform them that he had been let go. 9 people for a computer login issue. The calls went out before anyone had confirmed what was actually happening, before IT had been contacted, before any official communication had been received. The reason turned out to be routine, an IT problem. He was not fired. He got back into his computer. The 9 calls had been made on the basis of nothing. Kimmel's approach to this detail was to let it stand on its own. Patel angrily denied that story, he noted, and then delivered the line that reframed the entire denial. The contradiction is that the lawsuit he filed against The Atlantic specifically references this incident, not in a way that disproves it, in a way that confirms the event occurred while disputing the characterization. The lawsuit filed to deny the claim contains an account of the claim. The denial acknowledges the existence of the thing being denied. Kimmel raised one eyebrow slowly, and the audience understood. The press conference delivered everything the Senate hearing had not, in the specific sense that it delivered nothing useful while generating considerably more material. A reporter, not Sarah Fitzpatrick, not the journalist who wrote the original story, but a different reporter simply asking whether the story was accurate, attempted to ask a follow-up question and was interrupted. Patel's response to being asked a direct question was to tell the questioner that they were being extraordinarily rude. The question had been whether the allegations in the story were true. The response was a complaint about the manner in which the question was posed. Kimmel noted that this is, historically speaking, not how press conferences tend to diffuse controversies. There was also the matter of Italy. The United States Olympic hockey team had won its first gold medal in 46 years, the first since the Miracle on Ice, a genuinely historic sporting achievement that the country celebrated with appropriate enthusiasm. Kash Patel, director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, attended the game on the FBI jet, which he had taken to Italy specifically to be present at the Olympic hockey tournament. This might have passed without much discussion had it not been for the footage from the celebration in the locker room afterward, which showed Patel bouncing through the scene with the energy of someone who had, in Kimmel's description, the quality of the Adderall bunny, pumping his fists and moving through the space with a level of enthusiasm that Kimmel connected, without needing to say it directly, to the broader conversation the country had been having about the director's relationship with various substances. Kimmel also located the video in its proper historical context. Patel had previously criticized his predecessor, Christopher Wray, for using government aircraft for what Patel described as unnecessary travel, specifically referencing Wray's use of a government jet and estimating the cost of each flight at $15,000. The man who said the FBI director does not need a government-funded G5 to go on vacation had taken the FBI jet to Italy to attend an Olympic hockey game and participate in the post-game locker room celebration. Kimmel ended the observation with the specific timing of someone who knows exactly when to stop. "And now, if you'll excuse me, I'm off to do Jaeger bombs with the hockey team." The hearing also produced one exchange that deserved its own moment of silence. Senators had asked Patel whether he could state unequivocally that he had not been intoxicated or absent during his tenure as FBI director. His response was not a direct answer to the question. His response was that he does not listen to the fake news mafia, and that when they get louder, it just means he is doing his job. Kimmel processed this for a moment and then offered a suggestion. He's so wound up, he's so angry. If only there were some kind of magic liquid he could drink that would calm his nerves. The audience took a full 3 seconds to finish responding to that line before he could continue. The Fox News interview produced its own contribution to the archive. Patel sat for a conversation at the FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia. The footage that accompanied the interview was not, Kimmel specified with notable precision, altered in any way. What it appeared to show was a perspective scale issue that made the director of the FBI appear significantly smaller than the furniture around him. Kimmel's assessment was delivered with the gentle warmth of someone admiring something unexpectedly precious. They're so cute when they're little. And then there was the explanation for Italy. Patel, asked why he had attended the Olympic hockey games using FBI resources, offered a security justification. He had been present, he explained, to protect United States athletes, specifically by tasting their beer to ensure it had not been poisoned. This was the official explanation offered by the 9th Director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation for why he had taken a government jet to Italy and been photographed in the locker room of the gold medal-winning hockey team. Tasting beer for safety. Kimmel absorbed this explanation, looked directly into the camera, and allowed the silence to run for precisely as long as it needed to run before moving on. What Kimmel kept returning to, across the entire segment, was the particular irony of the situation's structure. Every response to the original allegations had extended the story rather than shortened it. The lawsuit drew more attention to the Atlantic report than the Atlantic report had generated on its own. The press conference produced footage of behavior that commentators immediately connected to the behavior being described in the report. The Senate hearing produced no answers about the Epstein files, but produced a sitting senator publicly predicting the director's imminent departure. The Italy footage arrived as the conversation about workplace behavior was at its loudest. The FBI is supposed to be the agency that investigates things, that builds cases, that follows evidence wherever it leads regardless of inconvenience, that operates according to the principle that facts exist independent of how uncomfortable they are to acknowledge. The allegation at the center of this story is that the man leading that agency had repeatedly been incapacitated on the job to a degree that required his security detail to attempt to rouse him. More than 24 people told that to a reporter. The reporter published it. The response was a lawsuit for $250 million, a Senate hearing that produced no answers, a press conference that produced more questions, and an explanation about beer safety at the Olympics that will exist in the record for as long as records are kept. Kimmel's closing observation on the situation did not require much ornament. When someone whose job demands discipline, judgment, and precision is alleged to have displayed the specific opposite of all three, and when every action taken in response to that allegation reinforces rather than resolves the concern, the story does not need a writer. The story writes itself. What Late Night provides is simply the willingness to read it aloud at the right speed, with the right pause after the line about the beer. The 7th floor of the Hoover building was, according to available reporting, frequently unoccupied. Italy was, by contrast, very well attended.